Okay, we can make a start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Governance Committee on Tuesday, the 24th of May, 2022. My name is Councillor Colin Sharples. I'm the Vice Chair of the Governance Committee, and I'm standing in this evening for the Chair who's unavailable. Before we start this evening, I would just like to outline some housekeeping rules. There are no planned fire alarms, so if it does sound, please leave via the emergency exits. And can I request that all mobile phones are kept on silent and/or switched off? Thank you. Yeah. We have present councillors, officers and an external auditor. Members of the committee are attending in person here at the Civic Centre with officers. Our external auditors are present on Microsoft Teams. Other members of council may also dial into the meeting via Teams to observe and/or participate in the meeting. Only members of the committee present at the Civic Centre are entitled to vote. Please note, this meeting is recorded and live streamed via YouTube. The web link for this can be found on the council's website. Members on Teams are asked to keep their microphone on mute and only unmute when they wish to speak. And could I remind members to unmute themselves once they have finished speaking to enable the meeting to proceed smoothly. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor David Shaw and Councillor Ian Watkinson, and we have Councillor Forrest in attendance this evening as substitute for Councillor Watkinson.
Thank you.
Declarations sorry, excuse me, Councillor Turner's. I'm replacing Dave Shaw.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ange. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, we won't be able to vote, Councillor Turner, but thank you for joining in the debates anyway.
Understood.
Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interests to declare? Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. I have the minutes of the last meeting in front of me for approval. Are there any points of accuracy on the minutes? Can we propose the minutes for approval?
Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just a query on page 4, item 40, the minutes of the meeting. Under resolved, it says that it was agreed that there would be amended wording to it. At what point in time will we be able to get visibility of those amended minutes? Thank you.
If I can, Chair, those minutes have been updated now and they are reflected on ModGov. I will send you a copy after the meeting and highlight the amended wording, if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I seem to recall at the last meeting I asked for an action to be done to provide a report on our performance of payment to suppliers to the council. That's not been recorded in the minutes.
Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Sorry, I don't recall that at the last meeting, but we can certainly produce the information and provide it and circulate it to members requested.
Okay, well, I did ask.
I don't doubt it. I don't recall though. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a proposer for the minutes? Seconder? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, do we have to vote on it? Yes. Okay, we need to accept those, so there'll be a vote. Should we do a show of hands, all in favour, will that do? Fine, okay, thank you. So we move on to item 4, audit progress report and sector update. I'd like to invite Matt Derrick from Grant Thornton to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. And just want to give apologies on behalf of Georgia Jones. She had intended to attend in person tonight, but she's been taken ill, unfortunately, and I wasn't able to travel down in time. Our first report, the progress report, I'll just jump into kind of page 12 in the pack. So this just gives a summary of progress to date and the 21-22 audit. We've largely completed our audit planning work in preparation for the final accounts audit in a few months' time. We've updated our kind of understanding of the authority's systems and controls processes, and we're presenting our audit plan on the next item on the agenda as well for the forthcoming audit. Just over the page, since the last Governance Committee, we have now certified the housing benefit subsidy claim on the 25th of March and made the submission to DWP. So happy to report that's all been finalised. A little behind the deadline, but still ahead of many other authorities, I'm glad to say. So that's been completed. Over the page, on page 14 in the pack, this just gives a bit of an overview of the additional fees that we've proposed on the 2021 audit, and sets out the reasons for the additional fees here, largely due to some of the delays caused by the IT system upgrade, which prevented officers in finance being able to provide us with the necessary information to commence the audit as planned back in July last year. And following that, we had some significant delays working with the council's external valuer as well, which added additional time to the audit. And then finally, additional time was required just to work through some of the errors that we identified through the course of the audit work as well, mainly in the PPE depreciation calculations, and then to the pensions balances, particularly with the kind of lump sum payment in advance and how that had been accounted for. So this paper there just sets out the underlying kind of causes of those additional fees there. The rest of this report, the timetable of the page on page 16 just sets out kind of the high level timetable for the 21-22 audit. The kind of reporting deadline has reverted to will be the 30th of November, and all indications are that we'll be able to deliver the audit to that timetable this year. And then the rest of the pack just sets out, so I can say, some of the sector information, a bit of a summary on our most recent kind of quality reviews, and useful insights from our local government team as well. That's everything I wanted to present, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. So, any questions from members of the committee? Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of comments. One on page 14 relating to the additional fees. The IT system upgrade. Can you give us confidence that those issues have now been satisfactorily resolved and that won't happen again? Equally, with the delays with the valuer, which was down to inadequate evidence being provided to the auditor in time, is it now well understood exactly what evidence the valuer needs in order to do his work? That's the first comment. The second comment is on page 18. And it's down towards the bottom of column 2, the penultimate paragraph. And it's talking about the value for money programme, which is now being sort of expanded in terms of the issues that auditors are going to look for. It says, as part of our enhanced value for money programme, we will focus on identifying the scope for better use of public money, as well as highlighting weaknesses in governance or financial stewardship where we see them. I think it's related to the next report as well. I'm just interested in what the auditor's view are. What does financial stewardship actually mean? And in the later report, so I don't have to ask the same question again, it refers to expenditure recognition. If you could just clarify for the committee, please, what exactly does that mean you will be evaluating? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll answer the VFM question first, if that's all right. So financial stewardship really relates to the authority's responsibility to spend taxpayers' money wisely and promote sustainability in delivery of public services. And so in the value for money scope, the financial sustainability area of our review is really where that comes into play there. expenditure recognition. So this relates to how transactions are recorded and reported in the statutory accounts, and this relates to our assurance that transactions are reported accurately, and recognition really kind of reflects. Correct recognition of expenditure would mean that a transaction has been recorded when it occurred in the correct financial period, kind of classified as the right type of expenditure within the accounts. And for kind of straightforward purchases of kind of tangible things, that's very straightforward, but it can become a bit more complex in terms of services, or where there are kind of payments in advance of actually receiving goods or services as well, to when that expenditure is recognised. On the first point on the IT systems and the valuer, I think I might redirect it to Louise to come in on that, because obviously the IT system, was kind of outside of our control.
Would you like to come in, please, Louise?
Yeah. So in relation to the IT, I think how the measures that have been put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again, we can get a comment from Asim Khan as Director of Customer and Digital on that. But what I can say is when the audit started, we had just moved over onto the new system, and that's what caused the delays. Since then, and after it started to stabilise, and we've had a stable system that we've been operating for a significant period of time now. It was just unfortunate that the changeover happened at the start of the audit, and we did not foresee that delay initially there. So I think in terms of the stable system that we've got, we wouldn't anticipate that happening again. As far as the valuer is concerned, that was an unfortunate set of circumstances. The valuer had a bereavement and was off for a significant period of time, and nobody picked that up. But I can say that as far as this year is concerned, we have put measures in place, and I too am chasing the valuer, and we have now got all the valuation reports for South Ribble. So we are several months ahead of where we would normally be at this point in time, and they have provided them. We've checked them, and that they're happy that they have provided everything that we need and that Grant Thornton have requested.
Okay.
I was going to say,
thank you for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Normally this would be for noting, but unfortunately we have to deal with the additional fees that have been identified, and that will require a vote. Do we do name vote, or do we just... Show of hands then for that. The vote is to accept the 2020-2021 additional fees identified on page 14 of the pack. That is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Can you now go on with the external audit plan?
Of course, thank you. Yep. So we're presenting here our audit plan report for the 21-22 financial statements audit and value for money audit. I'll just jump into page 30 in the pack, which just is the kind of overview. Just to highlight on this page that at the moment we are anticipating that the council may have to produce consolidated kind of group accounts for the 21-22 financial period. We are still awaiting kind of management's assessment of whether that is required at this point, and that's because of the establishment of the new subsidiary South Ribble Leisure during this financial year, which, if kind of material transactions and balances have occurred within the subsidiary that are material to the overall kind of group reporting, then a consolidated group set of accounts would need to be produced. Given the nature of the transactions and balances in the subsidiary, it's not a cause for concern in terms of a significant change to our audit approach, but it would require kind of an additional step in how the accounts are produced and how we audit those. I'll just jump over the page to the risks identified in the audit for this year, so page 31. The There's a required assumption under the auditing standards that we assume there's a risk of fraudulent revenue recognition. This is rebutable if we think that's justified. And in the case of South Ribble, we do think that it's suitable to review that risk on the basis that due to the nature of the revenue streams, and therefore we don't consider it to be a significant risk for the council. So we won't be undertaking any specific additional work other than normal audit procedures on revenue. There's also a required assumed risk of management override of controls, and this is the assumption that management may kind of circumvent the business as usual processes and controls. We're required to respond to this risk, and this really focuses around appropriate use of journals, manual journals to the financial reporting system and the accounts. And looking at also if there's any indication of kind of bias in the judgments applied to accounting estimates, and checking that they're reasonable and can be corroborated to supporting evidence. And then also if we identify any kind of unusual transactions or one-off transactions, new transaction streams as well, we'll put particular focus on that they're being accounted for appropriately. Over the page 32, the valuation of the pension fund liability continues to be a highly significant estimate in the financial statements. It's a highly material number and subject to a large degree of estimation uncertainty due to the nature of that balance. We rely heavily on the assurances provided by the pension fund auditor, which is ourselves as well. But in terms of the work that we do on the council statements is to check that the correct data has been provided to the actuary in order to calculate those balances. We review the kind of accuracy and completeness of that information, and look at the consistency between the actuary's calculations and then how the accounting has been done in the council's financial statements. And then we'll be looking at the reasonableness of any of the actuarial assumptions that have been applied as well in conjunction with that assurance from our pension fund audit team. Valuation of land, over the page, valuation of land and buildings and investment properties, again, continues to be a significant estimate in the council's accounts, due to the nature of how these numbers are derived, and the significant kind of materiality of the figures. We will be looking at how management has kind of evaluated the assumptions and judgments applied by the valuer. We're assessing the kind of competence and objectivity of the valuer as well, and then looking at the corroborating evidence that those assumptions are based on. We'll be looking at the actual accounting for those valuations as well to ensure that they've been correctly input into the financial system and into the ledger. And then we'll also be reviewing the progress with the prior year recommendation from our previous year's audit findings report, which was to do with the error in the way the depreciation is being calculated. Other risks that we've identified over the page. So other risks are things that are not necessarily significant risks, what we consider to be significant risks of material misstatement or irregularity, but other risks that we have the potential to be material, but we don't consider it to be at the moment. And this is the risk around kind of expenditure recognition, and largely arising from the weaknesses in controls around payments to creditors and managing kind of purchase orders. This was a risk we've had in the prior year, and it was a large focus of our work on the value for money work as well. And we do note that a lot of progress has been made last year, and kind of the residual actions to kind of resolve these issues have been delivered in the 21-22 financial year. But because some of those weaknesses kind of still existed for at least part of the year, we continue to recognise this as a risk for this year at least. And we'll be following up on the work that the council has done to kind of rectify those remaining issues. Over the page just gives a bit of background again on the kind of enhanced requirements for his auditing estimates and disclosures. And as part of this, we have we've submitted inquiries to management as part of our planning work, and those, I think, are the responses to those are the next item on the agenda for members to review and consider whether they're complete and kind of accurate. But part of that process is for management to give us their assessment of the significant estimates in the accounts, and the ones that we think are the most key, as I say, and the subject to significant risk are the valuation of land and buildings and pensions. But there are other estimates in the accounts, although we consider them not to be a significant risk of material misstatement. And those are things like the business rates appeals provision, depreciation itself is an estimate, and kind of the credit loss and impairment of receivables as well. I'll just jump ahead to kind of page 39, which just sets out materiality. Once again, applying kind of a 1.9% materiality based on gross operating expenditure, which is in line with the prior year, and that equates to our estimate at the moment. It equates to about 780,000, but that's based on the prior year figures, and we'll look to review that once we get the actual draft financial statements as well. Value for money risk assessment on page 41 and 42. This just sets out our risk assessment planning. Again, what we've identified for this year is the risk around deficiencies in the control environment. This is the same risk that we've brought forward from the prior year, and that we've completed a great deal of work on in the prior year. And as I said before, we do acknowledge that a lot of work has been done in 2021 and continued in 21-22. But given that some of those weaknesses remained in the current financial year, our value for money work will focus on following up to make sure that those remaining actions were delivered in the period, and that there's no remaining kind of weaknesses there. Finally, I'll just cover the kind of overall timetable. Page 43 just sets that out at kind of a higher level. We're looking to report hopefully around the September Governance Committee with our audit findings report and or auditor's annual report as well, reporting our VFM findings together with the financial statements opinion. That's everything I wanted to cover. So happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt, for your detailed report, and I throw it on to committee. Any questions? Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to management override of control, it's mentioned in quite a few places. I wonder if some of the officers could outline for us what work has been done already on that, and what's the additional work that's needed to finally satisfy the auditor that we keep him happy. Thanks.
Louise?
So I guess management override of controls would be a standard. Matt will probably respond to that. A standard item or area that any auditor would look to review on a set of accounts. The kind of areas that they would be looking for would be transactions, maybe that I myself as Director of Finance would put through the system, or any other officer manager would put through the system. We have a whole system of governance and internal controls, be that segregation of duties, authorisation of transactions, from purchase ordering right through to invoice approval to inputting of journals, and all of those aspects in our system of internal control is what we present to the auditors, and then they test it. But also during the year, the work that internal auditors would do, again, would go to validate and challenge the system that we have in place. So between internal and external audits that would be undertaken, we would look to be able to evidence that.
Matt, did you want to come in on that point as well?
I can do, yeah. Just Louise is absolutely right. no, unfortunately, no amount of work that the council can do would mean that we don't recognise that as a risk. It is a required risk under the auditing standards that we always assume that there is a risk of management overriding controls. But as Louise has set out there, our overall kind of view is that we don't think there's kind of a great deal of risk in this area, but the kind of standard procedures that we were required to do on any audit, no matter kind of our kind of risk assessment, is what we perform for all our audits there. And as I say, the main focus for the council here is around manipulation of the accounts and any kind of specific transactions and balances and any bias that we consider to be in any of those key estimates, really. But as I say, there's it's not a case of there's further work for the council to do that would mean that we eliminate that risk. It will always be an assumed risk.
Thank you, Matt. Alan, are you okay with that?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Damien.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just regarding page 33 with the investment properties. There's a comment made there that the valuation for 2021 represents a significant estimate by management. It doesn't mention the valuation, the value there. But it's just something that occurred to me with the last council meeting. We were looking at doing a land swap with some units that we owned on Boxer Place, and I'm just wondering how confident are we that those units on Boxer Place were fully up to value? Would we have had a valuer in to value those assets? Are we confident that we're getting a fair swap effectively?
So I wouldn't have the detail to hand on that particular one, but in relation to the report, our investment properties are valued by the professional valuer, but ultimately it is management that put them in the accounts. So, as with the actuarial valuations, those are provided by the pensions actuary, but it is management that are responsible for putting them in the report. So obviously we have to go off their expertise, but challenge them, and the auditors challenge us to make sure that we have in turn challenged the figures that they produce. And that would be just looking at kind of, significant increases or decrease in what the valuation was the previous years, or a pattern or trend over time to understand what it is and ask for further information if we need it. But in relation to the specific ones you said, I've not got that information to hand, sorry.
Gary, would you like to come in though?
I have. So the point here is that assets are only valued on a 5-yearly basis. So that's why estimates are used. But some assets are valued on an annual basis. In relation to any transaction that we do that might involve the valuation of an asset, at that point in time, we will have a valuation done. So in terms of the specific asset that you refer to, we've had a professional valuation done by an external valuer prior to that transaction taking place. So we've got an up-to-date valuation.
Okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any more questions from committee, members of the committee? Alan?
Just a plea. I'm looking at page 35 and it's talking about the accounting estimates and related disclosures, and down at the bottom of the page it says specifically, do governance committee members understand the category? I'm not going to read them all out. Personally speaking, I don't know about other members. I'm just wondering if at some point in time we can get some kind of brief on that allows us to understand it all a bit better. Thank you.
Louise?
So the next item on the agenda gives a little bit more detail about the responses that we have given to the auditors, how we've produced those estimates and the information that we've relied upon. But absolutely, as part of the financial training, when we go through the statement of accounts, I'll ensure that that's picked up, and the key estimates where we've obtained that information from, and the process we go through to ascertaining a value. It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from members on committee? None. I can now go to members not on committee, and I do apologise, I didn't do that on item 4. This is a skill I've developed to speed up meetings. But for this item, Are there any questions from members not on committee? None. Okay. This one is just for noting. Can I thank Matt for stepping in? Thank you very much. And would you also pass on our best regards to Georgia, and we wish her a speedy and full recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that is noted, yeah. So we move on to item 6, management response to external audit planning inquiries. And I invite Louise Mattinson to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously ties into the previous paper and the point just made about the auditors will inquire of us and for us to provide details of key events that will have happened over the year and assumptions that we might have made, estimates we would have made and provisions that we've included in the accounts. So Appendix A is our response in relation to the very specific questions that the auditors have set us. So we will pick up things like key issues. So obviously during the year, the impact of COVID, the significant amount of funding that has come in and has been dispersed in relation to business grants. It asks us about whether our accounting policies are appropriate, and again we will look to evidence that as part of the audit. Requiring information around significant transactions that have happened during the year, and again the business grants that we've had to disperse on behalf of government are a significant element of that. We also refer to advisors that we have used in the year, be that legal advisors, valuers, and accountants, whoever that may be during the year, to provide them with details and what they have been involved in, and specifically information around our system of internal control, our approach to managing the prevention of fraud, and to ensure that the financial statements that we produce are not misstated in any way. So that is Appendix A, and I will refer you, if I may, to page 68. Having dispatched the papers, there was something that we did notice, which is on page 68 at point 11, and I think the question is a why, and the answer is just a simple no, or yes. So that doesn't really, we've not fully answered the question there, but I have got the details that would go into that specific point, which is about the accounts are prepared in line with CIPFA codes of practice, and previous audit recommendations have been taken into consideration. So we have addressed that response and provided that as such. Appendix B is more specific in relation to the accounting estimates that we have used and have incorporated into the financial accounts, be that valuations, which we've just already talked about. So we get the information from professionals, qualified professionals, experts, around land and buildings, and challenge those estimates. But there are other estimates that we include as well. So, for example, the provision for bad debts, where we review all of the invoices that are outstanding, or business rates, council tax that's outstanding, and have a methodology for providing for them, not because they've necessarily turned bad and we're not going to get the money, but because they are doubtful, and in line with accountancy policy, we would provide if there is a possibility that a debt could turn bad. So again, looking at the age of the debt and the amount concerned, and the responses to credit control procedures. Similarly, estimates we would make around business rates and appeals that may come forward, getting information from the valuation office and making assessments around that. So a whole host of things, again, that we provide to the auditors to give them assurance and information about how we've gone about it, and then they will pursue that as part of the audit to ensure that what we're saying is factually accurate.
Thank you, Louise. Questions from members of the committee? Damien.
Sorry, I'll just thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask on page 71. It asks whether management have used an expert, and it refers to in-house RICS qualified employees. I'm just wondering how many of those we've got at South Road Borough Council.
So the answer to that question is 2.
And they're capable of doing valuations?
Yes. Where we tend to use external advisors is on what I would call the more complex valuations. Sometimes some of the commercial properties are valued on a slightly different basis, and you need sometimes market information that's not necessarily always available internally. So we do pick and choose when we do that based upon on risk and the type of asset.
Just saying in relation to the figures that go into the accounts, as Gary mentioned before, we get things that all assets revalued on a cyclical basis at least 5 years, and they are done by an external valuer that goes into that.
Okay with that, David? Yeah. Any other questions? Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just one for the auditor, really. How does the auditor now satisfy himself that he's confident in the robustness of the responses that he receives from management? So what do you practically do in terms of looking at the implications of all those answers? Thank you.
Matt, would you like to reply?
Yes, thank you. So this is just one part of our kind of planning work. Excuse me. And these inquiries really feed into where we see kind of the risk arising in the audit this year. But what we kind of practically do with these responses is obviously look to corroborate some of this, particularly the accounting estimates. So really, this is the first step in understanding how the accounting estimates are produced. Now, a lot of these obviously we were required to kind of submit these inquiries every year again under the auditing standards, and primarily to check obviously there's been any significant changes with any of the estimates. So we would take this forward and use this to kind of develop and guide the audit procedures that we do, particularly around the estimates. And the other areas that the inquiries cover, the same principle really. So kind of related parties, things and risk arising around that, going concern. All of these responses kind of feed into our risk assessment and then guide the procedures we do in response to it. And we don't, it's not a case of we look at this and file it away until next year. It's if we as part of our audit, if we identify any evidence or the findings of any of our procedures indicate something different to what management has put in these responses, we will challenge officers on that to understand what's going on, and that's kind of how we use this.
Thanks, Matt. Hey.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. One additional query, and it's in relation to related parties, relationships with related parties. Now, this question might not be entirely relevant to that, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When it comes to the financial statements, do the auditors do a completely separate audit of South Ribble Leisure Limited, or is it effectively just encompassed as part of the overall South Ribble Borough Council financial statements? Thank you.
Matt?
So I can come back on this and then maybe invite Louise to comment as well. So at the moment, depending on the kind of size of the entity, how many employees, value of transactions and balances, it's not clear whether statutorily it would require an audit of the company itself, because there are kind of de minimis thresholds which exempt the requirement to have an audit. In terms of whether it's consolidated into the overall South Ribble Council accounts, that just comes back to the point I made at kind of the start of my audit planning presentation, is that there's still an assessment to be made by management, and then that needs to be provided kind of to us, and we will review that as to just how material the South Ribble Leisure company is to the overall accounts, and whether the excluding it from the overall financial statements would be a material omission, and would consider that the information be incomplete on that basis. That's an assessment to be made by management, and then us to consider that as well in terms of appropriateness and whether that's compliant with the SIPFA code. And so whether it gets reported, within the group as an overall group account, that remains to be seen. Obviously, whether you want to have a specific audit of the company, again, that can be done, voluntarily anyway. But I think initial indications are that wouldn't necessarily be required by the legislation.
Thanks, Matt. Alan, would you?
Yeah, no, okay, that's fine. Thanks for that.
Do we have any other questions from members of the committee?
Just to give you some more assurance about the leisure companies as well, we've done one internal audit review on the leisure companies this year, but next year we're planning to do a further 4 next year, and we're also working with the board of directors to look at the governance arrangements to make sure that they're robust.
Thank you, Dawn. Are there any questions from members not on committee?
Matt did give an explanation as to whether the accounts for the South Ribble Leisure would be in the accounts or not, depending on what happens. If they don't go into the accounts, what will happen? Where will we see a set of accounts for them separately or not? I wasn't quite sure from what he was saying.
Louise?
Yep. So whilst dependent on, we're pulling together the leisure accounts as we speak, and we will have to prepare a full set of accounts. We will have to file a set of accounts because it is a limited company, and we will have to file those with Companies House. Dependent on the financial limits, will determine whether they need to be an audited set of accounts. So that then has implications with Grant Thornton, and then separately whether they're audited or not audited, dependent on the values of the turnover, balance sheet, etc., will determine whether we produce consolidated accounts. So there's several factors, but there will be a full set of accounts produced because that is a legal requirement under the Companies Act, and we have to file those at Companies House. Yeah.
So we've got, whether they're consolidated, audited or whatever, we've got a set of accounts which obviously have to go to Companies House. I understand that. Where will they go as regards this council? Will they just go to Cabinet? Will they go to governance? Will they go to council? Where will they go?
Chris?
Yeah, I can answer that one. They will come to Executive Cabinet who sit as shareholder. So that's where they would be presented. They would be presented to the council as shareholder, and the shareholder function is discharged by Cabinet. So that's how they come to the council.
Happy with that, Margaret? Yeah. Were there any questions from people not on the committee? No? Okie dokie. Thanks again for your help there, Matt. We have to have a vote on this one. We do? Yes. I would like to propose that we approve the management responses to the auditor's inquiries. Do we have a seconder? Yeah. Okay, show of hands for the vote. Carried. That's carried. Good. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7. The Internal Audit Annual Report and Opinion 2021-22, and I'd like to invite Dawn Heighton to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, the report you have before you today is the annual report, which sets out all the work that we've completed over the course of the last year, and it's also the Head of Audit Annual Opinion. So I won't go through all the report in detail, but if I could just highlight a couple of specific areas. So at the top of page 83, there's a graphic there which clearly shows out where internal audit sits in terms of the 3 lines of defence, and giving that independent assurance, which just feeds in from the training we've just had in terms that internal audit is completely independent. As I said, the report contains the opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of risk management, governance and internal control, and that opinion has been formed taking into account many factors, and we've listed the factors there in that this is what we assess when we're gathering our assurance ratings. So we take into account the reviews that we've undertaken that are contained within the audit plan. We take into consideration any project work that we're involved with, any consultancy work, any advice we've given, the implementation of management actions, which is covered later in the report. We also have to take into account how ourselves as a service, are we performing, and whether we conform with the public sector internal audit standards. Any other sources of assurance that we can use and the reliability that we can place on them, the service assurance statements and the annual governance statement. So taking all those factors into consideration helps us to form the opinion. The other thing we have to make sure is that when we plan, when we produce the plan for the year, we have to make sure that we have got sufficient coverage of the whole authority so that the opinion you get is based on the whole authority and not just specific sectors of it. So again, the pie chart on page 84 shows the coverage of the authority broken down into all the different directorates. We've actually given our opinion at the bottom of page 84, and we've concluded that the council's arrangements are currently adequate. And the reason for that is over the past 12 to 18 months, the council has made significant progress and the direction of travel is definitely positive. However, there have been a lot of new processes introduced, new policies, and the challenge now is to make sure that they become fully embedded. And whilst we're not in a position to say they are fully embedded at this stage, hopefully, with the continuous improvement journey that the council's undertaking, we'll be able to give that assurance next year. Moving down, you can see that I've included a summary of all the reviews that we've carried out over the course of the year. And again, the appendix, we've given more detail about each review that we've undertaken and the reason for the assurance rating that it's been awarded. I've also explained about how we are involved in other reports or other groups that don't necessarily give an assurance of opinion. However, it does feed into the overall opinion. There were two reviews that we were unable to undertake, and that was not down to the Internal Audit Service not being able to deliver them. It was other factors, and one was the loss of the Section 106 officer. When we started that review, they'd in fact just left their post. So that particular review we will consider when we plan for the next cycle of audit plan from October to March 23. And again, the original plan did contain 2 ICT reviews. And again, given the work that's going on with the implementation of this digital strategy, it wasn't felt prudent to carry it out at this point in time. And again, that will be transferred into the October to March plan. In terms of the follow-up and management actions, again, when I returned to the authority last year, we were in quite a difficult position really in that management actions hadn't been followed up for a period of time. So we were in a position where we had a number of actions that were outstanding and we didn't have a robust system to make sure that they were implemented. So that's now been developed and is established. So every month the director gets a report showing each action that is outstanding and progress made so that they're fully aware. Now, whilst our implementation rate is slightly lower than we would like at 64% for South Ribble, again, we've reviewed each of those actions that are still outstanding and the reasons for those are justified. And again, as I've said in the report, I would expect that implementation rate with the changes that are coming within IT and across the staffing, that will improve over the next 6 to 8 months. I've added some commentary in there about the risk management arrangements, what the current position of those. But again, as is highlighted in the annual governance statement and as we just alluded to in the training, there is still work to do, but it's a much improved picture. Again, there is a section on the public sector internal audit standards, which is covered in much more detail in the next item on the agenda. However, in addition to the public sector internal audit standards, members may recall that we also were successful with the ISO 9001 quality management system this year, and we achieved our reaccreditation. Lastly, our own internal audit performance, as I've mentioned numerous times this year, this was a really challenging plan, and I know we deferred the 4 reviews. But we did have those difficulties with resources, and I think to be sitting here and to achieve all those targets, I think the team worked extremely hard. I'm really proud of them as a team, and I think to be sat here with that outcome is a really good result for our particular service. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, excellent report. Yeah, I think the direction of travel is really looking good. Any questions from members of the committee? Alan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think just to start with, if I can thank Dawn and her team for this report, which I think is a good report and a very objective report. So thank you for that. A couple of comments. If you look at the table that shows the results of the various reviews, there was 20 reviews and 16 of those, i.e. 80% of them, are only adequate or limited. Now, I know you said that there is still work to do and it's got to get embedded, but I'm just wondering what specifically are people going to be asked to do that gets us the next step up to getting most of these reviews up to substantial? So that's question number one. Question number two, there's a lot of reliance is put on Grace, both in the auditor's report and this report. Does the external auditor ever ask to get sight of data that's recorded on Grace? That's the second question. And the last question is just in relation to the very last page about the performance of the team in relation to planned time used and an audit plan completed. The figures of 94 and 91%, are they low because of the 4 deferrals? Or are those percentages based on the reduced scope of work after the deferrals have been deferred? If you understand what I'm asking.
I'll work backwards. So the figures of 94 and 91, they are based on the revised plan, so it's after the deferrals.
So that's a reduced scope.
Yeah. In terms of the external auditor and having sight of Grace, indirectly they do, because each audit report that we do clearly identifies all the risks and controls within Grace, and they are listed, and then we set out whether they are working or not. So in effect, they receive every internal audit report that we produce, so they are seeing the content of Grace in that way. In terms of how the services bring the scores up to substantials, there's a range of different reasons for the adequate scores, and it could be the reintroduction of controls that maybe have lapsed due to COVID, or it could be they've got resourcing issues, or it could just be that a new system's been implemented and they are, strengthening the control environment in that way. I cannot say give us definitive reason as they need to do this to improve it. Every review is completely different, but those management actions are agreed prior to us issuing those final reports, and that we have that commitment from the service that they are intending to improve that control environment.
Gary?
Yeah, is it just worth explaining what adequate means so everybody's absolutely clear?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a report.
Yeah, so it means that the majority of controls are working. I know it says adequate, but it doesn't mean that actually the majority of controls are working.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put some context to it.
We can partially depend on the evidence given.
Okay, I'm okay with that, Alan, yeah. Any further questions from members of the committee? Margaret?
It's actually relevant to you, Dawn, but you did mention ICT. And as we know, ICT has been given a lot of angst at the moment, an awful lot of angst. And you're not going to review it until October, which is another 5-6 months away. Do you think that leaving it so long is going to help or hinder the thing? Because it seems we just seem to be ICT is this, ICT, but we don't seem to be getting to a point where ICT is improving as far as I can see. You hear of various problems and various complaints. And I just wondered whether leaving it so long, it would be better to bring it forward in your audit plan to see if what you find could be helpful to actually getting the thing moving a lot faster and a lot better on track.
I think you need to go back to the role of internal audit, and that's to provide assurance that controls and systems are working effectively. And it's not the best use of our time, or we're not providing the best service to the council to review a service or an area where there are known issues. So the best use of our resource would be to let those issues be fixed, let them embed, and then we would come along at a later stage and provide that assurance.
That's why I said at the beginning, I don't know whether it's in your area.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? Any questions for members not on committee? None. Okay. Sorry, item 8, review of the effectiveness of internal audit. And because you did such a wonderful job on the last item, Dawn, I'd like to invite you to present this one as well.
Thank you. This report sets out basically how we conform with the public sector internal audit standards and the local government application note. So basically what this does is this gives members the assurance that the opinion we give and the work that we carry out is in full compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. Now last year, members asked for sight of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, so that's been attached to the report. But also is attached is all the standards that we have to meet. And I've attached those, I think there's, as I've said in the report, I think there's 130, can't find it now, but I think there's 134 different aspects to the standards. And we meet 128 of them. There are 5 which we do not relate to us, they're not applicable, and we've only got 1 partial conformance, and that's in relation to fraud, which is also featured in the annual governance statement as well. So we do have a robust quality assurance process, both for our own internal reports, in which Jackie's heavily involved with. So we know that each audit has to go a review process, but in addition to our own internal review processes, we also have to be externally verified, and that's once every 5 years. The last one was done in 2018, and the next one's due in January. But they will take this self-assessment that I presented to you today and make sure that it's accurate and that I'm not just making it up as I go along, basically. But that's the purpose of it. It's a very rigorous process that we have to go through, but it gives you the assurance that the opinions and the assurance ratings we give, you can take some assurance that we're conforming with the standards. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Very, very detailed and accurate report. Any questions for members on committee? Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a simple one. Obviously, this is a very comprehensive report. Can I inquire how many days' work was involved in preparing it, and do those days come out of the annual audit plan day resources, or is it over and above those figures? Thanks.
It normally takes about, I'd say, about a day and a half for us to go through, because obviously it was more resource intensive to do it the first time, but once you do it, you're just updating it to reflect any changes. So it's not too bad, to be honest. It's included with our non-chargeable time, which is separate from the audit plan.
Okay, all I would say is well done in doing it in a day and a half.
I was going to say exactly the same, actually. Any further questions from members on the committee? Any questions from members not on the committee? No? Okay, this again is for noting. We're doing well. Item 9, draft annual governance statement. It's your turn, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. It's good timing for this to be presented following the two reports that you've just had from Dawn in many respects, because the annual governance statement is the summary snapshot of the governance position of the council. So it's point in time assessment. And the report and the document itself sets out how we go about undertaking that assessment. It is compliant with the SIPFA guidance document from 2016, and it demonstrates how we deliver the 7 core principles of that framework, which are detailed at page 155 of the pack. This document follows after the approval of the local governance framework that was approved by the committee at the last meeting, and so this is how this is the results of the testing against that framework, and at pages 156 onwards, 158, we detail the different bodies and structures and processes that we actually test against, methods that we test against that framework. And I say it's good timing because we only provide a brief summary of how that testing is undertaken, because that is the point of this document. I think it was an issue raised either last year or the year before, when it was a very long document and it was a challenging read. I think somebody flagged up and said, look, why is it this long? There were particular reasons. It should be a summary document. It should be a quick snapshot read. So it is a lot shorter now and a lot more simplistic to read. But the reason I say it's good timing to consider this after Dawn's 2 reports is because that's the level of detail that has gone into the assessments that have been pulled together in this report. So you'll see that at page 160 is actually the internal audit and head of audit opinion. So that was the document, that was the report you've received 2 reports, 2 agenda items ago, and you'll see how that conclusion in relation to the governance environment has been formed, and then the following report will show the competence of the team that have actually delivered that assessment. So a couple of external assessments, because it's always worthwhile having that external finger in the air, if you like, to review how we're performing. So we do look at corporate complaints and local government ombudsman reports into how we address our actions. And on page 162, we do make reference to the peer challenge that took place last year. And one of the priority or the issues that we asked the peers to review was around the governance environment of the council, and they've made a couple of recommendations which are identified in the report, but at the recent follow-up visit they've expressed satisfaction at the progress that we've made, not only in the implementation of the works that we've done, but in the embedding of those. The key part of this of the annual governance statement, though, really is section 5, and these are where we identify areas to strengthen the governance environment. So it's a very honest assessment. We don't hide anything. We don't pretend we're something we're not. So the first table at page 163 is last year's action plan, last year's improvement plan, and you're going through the list. You'll see the vast majority of the actions have been completed or partially completed. The second table, which is on page 166, is a bit briefer, but it does identify further areas for improvement. And I have to stress, these are not identified as issues or of significant concern. We are, I think Louise used the phrase, an organisation that looks to continuously improve. And these are things that we have identified as things we can do better after the internal audits have been undertaken and the other forms of assessment have been undertaken. So I wouldn't necessarily propose to take you through each and every one because, well, I'm sure you've all read the papers, but I'm happy to take any questions on the document. I think I just want, last point, it's a pleasure to actually introduce this to members this year. I'm sure you'll all be aware it's been testing from a governance perspective in the last couple of years, and to get to the point where I can bring a document to you that is a lot shorter than it was, that identifies matters that need to be improved, but I can sit here and categorically say to you, these are not matters that members should concern themselves with unduly. These are simply matters where we as an organisation say we can do better. So it's a pleasure to produce this tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Okay. Questions from members on committee? Thank you, Alan. You haven't let me down. Everyone, I knew I'd get a question from Alan. Thanks.
Yes, I'm also grateful that this is a much shorter report than it used to be, and I have to say it's quite user friendly, which is good for everybody. Just a couple of comments. On page 161 under corporate complaints, there's reference to one LGO investigation from a previous year received in this period, which required an apology from the council. I just wonder if you were able to enlighten us as to the nature of the subject that needed an apology. And the second question is on page 164 under risk management. It says ensure risk management is embedded throughout the organisation and within all council activities. Well, Don and I know that this council has been attempting to embed Grace for about 6 years, I would reckon. So I'm just wondering what do you see as being the measure of success of it finally becoming embedded? Thank you.
To hand, but I'll get it to you. As I say, this is a snapshot, so I don't go into that level of detail in that, but it's for an organisation of this size to have so few complaints in that period as well, when you consider what was going on, and to only really have one upheld from a previous period, and that's an apology, which is pretty much as low as an action that the LGO can take. It's quite a good message. Sorry, yes, with the risk management, this is rolled forward into this year's action plan, and I think we recognise the point that you've made in that an action to embed something is actually quite difficult to demonstrate. So we've actually changed the action for this year in order to develop improved reports for directors to use from the Grace system to enable them to better manage risk within their teams. And by using those reports as part of the monthly enhanced DMT sessions, then directors are then in a position to actually manage that risk better. So that's the improvement to the control environment.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, do we have any other questions from Chair? Yeah.
Yeah, the peer review mentions political parties working better together. I just wondered, how can we go about that? What are the steps that...
Do you want to have a go at answering that?
Right. I think some steps were taken by the Mayor at the meeting last week in some of the comments that he made and the approach that he brought to the meeting, and I think that's taking ownership of the issue and moving it on. We've taken other actions as well as a consequence of some of these recommendations to perhaps try and resolve some of the issues that are perceived to exist. So we have approached Northwest Employers, not Northwest Employers, I forget, the Centre for Public Scrutiny and Governance, and they're doing a piece of work for us at the moment, which will review some of the arrangements we have in place in relation to meetings and how we work. So that will either identify any issues or improvements, or and that will be brought to members in due course, or he might even say, no, you're doing fine, status quo is okay. So we need to wait for the outcomes from that. I will continue to work with groups and members around the code of conduct, and we're reviewing the code of conduct at the moment with a working group, so that hopefully will simplify the whole standards environment for members, providing greater clarity but also a bit more flexibility in approach. So there are a number of actions that we are taking. I suppose as officers, there's got to be I think there's got to be a certain level of self-reflection by members as well. Yeah, and that's something that I will happily work with members on to bring that forward, and I'm sure the other members of the senior management team would say the same thing.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for members on committee? No. Any questions for members not on committee? None. This one's for vote, isn't it?
It is. Can I just say on this?
Yep.
This is presented in draft. The vote will be taken on approval of it. It does, however, go to external audit who do have a quick look at it. The reason we put the recommendation is to get it signed off as it is because if there's no comments on it and no proposed changes, then we can just sign it off because it does form part of the statement of accounts, and I don't want my bit to hold up Louise's bit because she'll shout at me.
Can't imagine. Okay, I propose then that we approve the annual governance statement as a correct statement of the council's governance environment and be recommended to the leader and chief executive for signature. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Show of hands. That's unanimous. All done. That therefore is the end of the meeting, I think. Can I thank everybody for their attendance, officers for the reports and your diligence, and members for all your contributions. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey home.